Are you tired of your valuable ideas and suggestions getting lost in the shuffle? Well, that is why I'm introducing Direct Suggest, the revolutionary digital suggestion box that puts your voice front and center. With Direct Suggest, you have the power to make a difference in your organization. Direct Suggest provides value to organizations in various industries worldwide, including notable brands like Comcast, TD Bank, and Nokia. And here's the best part. Direct Suggest only costs 50 cents per employee per month, making it an affordable solution for businesses of all sizes. Plus, they have an incredibly high ROI and savings potential with an average 33 times return on investment. The implementation process is also a breeze. Once committed, setting up Direct Suggest from start to finish can be completed in as quickly as a week or less. Don't let your ideas or your team's ideas go unnoticed. Visit directsuggest.com today and start by making a difference with Direct Suggest. Use the promo code HUMANHR for your extended 60-day free trial. Again, visit directsuggest.com to learn more, and remember to use promo code HUMANHR for an extended free trial. Direct Suggest, where your voice matters. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Today, I have another fabulous guest on, and I have to say, I'm getting back into the swing of things. It's been a number of months since I've recorded, let alone recorded with guests, so I appreciate your understanding if I fumble over my words, but so far, so good. Before we get into it, just don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Ben Eubanks, who is an author, speaker, and researcher living in Huntsville, Alabama. His team surveys thousands of employers and workers each year to understand the latest workplace trends and changes. His latest best-selling book, Talent Scarcity, explores how to hire and keep workers during a talent shortage. He also founded HR Summer School, an event with more than a million minutes watched in 2023 alone. I'm going to just say that sentence one more time so that my editor can make it all nice. He also founded HR Summer School, an event with more than 1 million minutes watched in 2023 alone. In addition, he hosts We're Only Human, a podcast focused on improving human resources, one HR pro at a time. When he's not speaking or writing, he spends time with his 4 kids and runs in a variety of outlandish races for fun. Welcome, Ben. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Excited for the conversation and looking forward to some fun.
Yes, me too. I am intrigued by the idea of an outlandish race. Can you share like the latest one?
Absolutely. The latest one, I actually back just a few months ago recently was able to achieve a milestone I've been 2 years working on and was able to finish a 50-mile race. So
Whoa.
That was a big focus. Last year I had plans to do it because the year before I've had to drop out at 42 miles. Last year I broke my big toe playing with the kids after wrestling season because I coach youth wrestling. And so this year, like, stay away from the trampoline parks and get in, get practiced, get ready, get prepared, and was able to finish that.
That's amazing. Congratulations. How do you train for that? Multiple marathons?
Listen, there's a very fine line between bravery and stupidity, as I've heard. And so I don't know which side I fall on. And my wife would tell you one or the other. But really, the truth is, when you get to that distance, it's more of a mental thing than anything else. So yes, if you can run 20, 25 miles, you could probably finish 50. It wouldn't be very comfortable, but you could finish that. It just comes down to how bad do you want it. And so I love doing those kind of events for that exact reason. My body probably doesn't appreciate it, but I'm always kind of curious to see what more can I accomplish. That's why I've written books. That's why I love speaking. I love pushing past what's comfortable, because sometimes you find something truly exciting about yourself you never would have otherwise.
That's amazing. Well, I love the message behind what you've done. That's so incredible. I mean, I can only imagine how few people are running a race like that, considering, you know, it's the marathon is usually like the pinnacle for people in terms of their, you know, physical achievement. Mm-hmm. And then to imagine double that, that's pretty impressive.
Well, there's a tie back, honestly, in the running space there's a tie back to HR and work as well. It's really kind of fun because I love running those longer races when they are a trail event, because on the trail, it's like we are out here together against the wilderness. When
Hmm.
you are in a road race, it's like I'm out here against you. So you trip in a road race and people are like kicking you, jumping on you, like, get out of my way. You trip in a trail race and you got three people there like, hey, do you need some water? Are you okay? I got a Band-Aid here. And so it's just a very different sense of we're in this together. And so I love the parallels that I can draw from some of those experiences back into work, back into how we should be treating people, because it's my reminder that we have a lot of influence on those things. And if you only see one side of that, you may never realize what the other side has to offer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's so interesting. And it's definitely a reminder, too, that we are doing so much more than just working 9 to 5, so to speak. I mean, there's a whole person behind the person, right? Well, given you're here naturally to talk about some of the things that you professionally have expertise in, of course, and I love that you related running to HR because we are going to spend a lot of time talking about HR. One of the things that I want to maybe just start out with is this idea and conversation around recent trends. And I know you just published a report on talent acquisition trends. Can you walk us through some of the findings and if you're surprised by any of the findings?
So yes, absolutely. So I do a ton of research, and it's so fun because I started my career in HR. Now I get a chance to do research and share that data back with all of our friends in the space who are doing the hard work every day, trying to help them be a little bit better, make a better decision, all that good stuff. So the new report on talent acquisition trends, we surveyed over 1,200 employers and over 1,000 candidates globally to figure out what's going on, what's a priority, all that good stuff. So on the employer side, a couple quick things. Some of the trends we're looking at are things like the importance of relationships, especially in a more automated world. For example, when I've recruited people in the past, I felt like that connection lingered past the start date and on beyond that. And we had one of our advisory board members say, hey, is that true? Because I feel that same way. So we asked that question, and candidates actually told us that that person they connect with, that relationship that they have with that recruiter lingers for a year or even longer for about 2/3 of them. And many of them also say that makes them feel more connected to the company overall. So that one's kind of fun to see that one.
Yeah.
We're seeing more companies using AI tools, things like that. 4 out of 10 companies in the data, hold on to your seat. 4 out of 10 told us that they actually have fewer recruiters today because of those tools. So do I think we're ever going to get to a future where we're completely recruiterless? No. But for some high volume roles, especially, employers are saying putting a human in the mix just slows it down, creates more unpredictability, doesn't add value. They don't stay any longer, perform better. So we're going to take the human out. But for
Wow.
other types of roles, you're hiring another HR person, an executive, an engineer, probably need a person in the mix there. And then one other one I'll throw out there is on onboarding. We saw a big focus there. Employers told us that's their number one priority this year across all of TA, like the very last step there, transition to employee onboarding was number one. But at the same time, we saw in the data that only 15% of companies said they have a really personalized and engaging approach to onboarding. The rest of them say, well, we're compliant. We got your tax forms and all that policy sign-offs, but not a lot more than that. So there's a lot of opportunity there for us to make that more meaningful and more connected to each person we're trying to bring in.
That's fascinating. I can't say I'm necessarily surprised by the findings. I think, if anything, it validates some of the
Yes.
thought leadership, right, that's been out there. Like thinking about the AI data, for example, 4 out of 10 people saying that, or I should say, 4 out of 10 of those roles are being basically not replaced, but managed by AI tools, right? That's effectively what's being shared. I mean, I think there are some people who are going to listen to this and they're probably really upset by this number. And whether that's because that's their job or maybe that's the job that they want. But really, we've seen throughout HR, I mean, throughout the last few decades, that through the leveraging of tools, whether it's an AI tool or some other form of technology, does actually improve our ability to do our jobs. So today, maybe those jobs have seen some replacement, but tomorrow it doesn't mean that all 10 are going to be fully automated or fully leveraging AI. So before everyone gets upset, don't worry. There's process improvement happening, and in fact, it will probably just make your jobs better.
I'll add to that. One of the things that we see is, for example, a couple of years ago, a lot of large companies had a coordinator or scheduler on their recruiting team to do all that painful stuff of scheduling interviews. I don't know about you, but I never once said, you know what I really want to do? I want to get into HR and schedule interviews all the time.
Never.
None of us want to do that. Or I want to look through the stack of 500 resumes and figure out the 10 we're going to call back. None of us wanted to do those things. They're just an incidental part of our jobs. So we're using some tools to take some of that stuff off of our plate. We're then spending more time actually having the data. We see employers that we say, if you're freeing up time, what are you reinvesting that time into for your recruiters? And they're reinvesting it into relationships, reinvesting it into showing the business the value that we're bringing to the table. We're focusing on those other things instead of just saying, let's kick our feet up and play Candy Crush or Farmville or whatever the cool kids are playing these days. I don't know,
Right.
but like, let's just waste that time. No, they're reinvesting it back into things that are very high value, as you said.
Amazing. And this kind of, I do want to come back to the other 2 points that you found resonant in the report. The first being the relationship with recruiters. I think that totally makes sense. I can think of recruiters that I still stay in touch with, even though I'm not looking for a job, but just because we had a really good relationship and still do. And relationships, I'll go on record, and I think I've said this before on my podcast, that relationships are like the number one thing, if you ask me, because when you have a trusting relationship with anyone, whether it's a recruiter or someone else in the business, if you're an active employee or you're a candidate, those relationships go so far. I got my job today where I work for a tech company because of the relationships that I built when I was a customer of our product. So, it just, to me, it goes to show that relationships really can have a major impact. And we see this all the time. People post on their LinkedIns about how, they're reaching out to their networks, right? They're looking for that next start of their next phase in their career, and they're hoping for the people that they've connected with to take them to that next level. So, it kind of is ingrained, I would say, in the way that people operate, and also the way that people probably find the most reward in their careers, because when you feel really good about the people you work with too, or that you want to work with, it just makes that experience better. And I think to really think about the onboarding piece, it's speaking to me, because at my job, like, we're really focused on onboarding. And it's funny because I feel like onboarding is never at 100%. There's always some evolution, right? Year over year, it's like, okay, we mastered onboarding, and the next year it's like, oh crap, we have to do more for onboarding. And so, when I hear that end stage, really, for a recruiter, like, or talent acquisition professional, that's the moment where they're handing off to the internal HR team, potentially, and hiring managers, because they've gone from candidate to new hire. And it is the most important step once someone becomes an employee, if you ask me, because onboarding starts before the person starts. It starts, like, really in that TA phase. And when onboarding is really good, the experience is really good. So I wish I could say I was surprised, but I think it's a wonderful data point that makes the top 3.
I was making a note. I was on a webinar yesterday, and I mentioned the person I was speaking with, we're talking about the onboarding piece, and I was like, this phrase came to me. I was like, this is meant to be. And like, that onboarding piece for the actual employees that's starting, it's either a springboard into greatness, or it's a stumbling block that, right, makes them second guess that. Because 2 out of 3 candidates say that once they take a job, they know if they're going to stay there within 5 days. So that first week, how they're treated, how they feel connected. In the past, it was longer. We had more of a grace period. Now it's like, I am double checking everything. And so many times candidates, even for hourly type roles, have multiple offers, multiple employers seeking them, because there's still more jobs available than there are people to fill them. And so, like, those things give them a lot more leeway in that and let them have more control. And if the employer's not leaning in, they'll have someone that just drops out early, or they'll have ghosting, all that other kind of the problems around that. So we've got a lot of data there that just back this up and help us to know that matters so much. You mentioned trust and relationships, the key part of this. One of the things we really dove into this year was transparency, and asking candidates, what does transparency mean to you in the hiring process? What matters to you? Probably no surprise, pay was the number one thing there. But right behind that, there were other things that mattered. Only 2% of candidates said transparency doesn't matter. The rest of them said on some form or fashion it does. So talk to me about the development opportunities. Once I join your company, what plan do you have for me? Or is this just another dead end job? What sort of culture do you have here? What are the values like? What do you believe in as an organization? And then something very simple and straightforward. what's the rest of the process look like? If I happen to make it past this one, what's next for me? Is this a 6-month process? In that case, I'm out. Is this a 3-step interview? Like what should I expect? And just helping them see those things and get a glimpse into that. Those are all ways to be transparent as an employer. They cost us nothing and they increase the interest of candidates in us. And so like it's a win for everybody across the board.
Absolutely. I love that. Something that stood out to me as you were sharing that, and I fully agree with everything that you've said, is this idea of the process. Like, what does the process look and feel like for a candidate? And depending on who you're interviewing with, it could look very different. Is there any data around like the ideal length of time for a candidate? I see you're smiling. You're probably
smiling so big.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. You're jumping out of your seat. Go ahead. Tell me.
Podcast. Like, look deeply into your radio and your headphones and see me like grinning ear to ear over here. So here's what I'll tell you. We did some gathering on this because I was super curious. I was working with a company that does a lot of frontline hiring, and they said we have these hiring managers that swear by this 4-step, screening, interview, come back again, and then come back again. And they said it's costing people. We need some data on that. So we actually gathered some research and found that overall, candidates tell us that anything more than 3 touch points is too much. It's overkill. So if you have a phone screen, you have an interview, you have a follow-up with them just to confirm some things, like that's enough. They don't want more than that. If someone's making less than $50,000 a year, it's 2 touch points. Right? Don't ask them to invest a big chunk of their time, their life, their effort, their energy, especially when there's a very low percentage chance they're going to get picked overall. Right? 99% of the candidates that apply don't get selected. So make that very easy for them. That's one of the things we see. I was talking with Sarah Falpel from Enterprise recently. And one of the things they did is they're doing a lot of IT hiring. And she was telling me that, again, hiring managers swearing by these things, all these extra steps, it's creating this long dragged out process. And she said, what we were finding is some of the very best candidates were the ones who were selecting out early on. They're opting out because they don't want to put up with this. So what they did, instead of saying, okay, you meet with manager 1 here, manager 2 here, manager 3, they said, no, we're going to have a committee. Everybody's going to come in. They're going to meet with that team as a group. The interview may be a little bit longer, but then they're all hearing the answers in one place and they can make their decision then instead of having them come back again and again and then finally making a call on that. She said that's reduced our time to fill these jobs for something as difficult to hire as technology pretty significantly. And it just came down to getting them all on the same page instead of letting them be their little king of their own domains, essentially. So that's my words, not hers, but I think that sort of optimization, like you're talking about, is an opportunity for all of us because it makes it better for us as HR and talent leaders. It makes it better for the hiring managers to get faster fills in their jobs. And the candidates are much more satisfied with that.
Absolutely. I mean, it really makes sense, especially when you mention people who are applying for jobs that are under a certain salary minimum, I should say, or maximum potentially. I mean, it all makes sense. I also realize that in some industries, maybe it's more difficult, or maybe it's not even industry related. Maybe it's like depending on the level. Like we know, for example, that senior leadership roles or C-suite roles, it's kind of just like built in and innate that they're going to meet with a board, potentially meet with every executive, and I like this idea that Susan shared with you that they are taking this approach of having like a group interview basically and a round table experience so that everyone can kind of be in the room at the same time, because then inevitably what happens is it's the hiring managers or the internal employees, the interviewers, who are putting the burden on themselves, I should say, where it's a little bit harder for them because they have to organize their schedules. They have to be able to find time to meet, right? Which is very difficult just in general. But if it's one meeting or maybe 2 meetings total for the candidate, it's just a little bit frictionless compared to what typically would happen. I once went through an interview an interview process, I should say, that was like 7 or 8 interviews. And I was like, by the time that I got to the end, I was not offered the job. And I was really glad that I wasn't, because I was so frustrated by the end of it. I saw your face too. You're like, oh.
Everybody out there listening right now just cringed when you said 7 interviews. Like, oh my goodness. What's really interesting to me is if anyone listening here has ever had to sit down after a set of interviews is done and calibrate with hiring managers to figure out who we're going to pick, like that's a painful process sometimes, because during the interview, they make like 3 notes. They got one Post-it note with all their information about the candidate during the
Right.
interview. That was a 45-minute interview. Like, that's all you wrote down? Like, how do you even remember? No, I
Right.
remember. Do you really? Having them go through that together, they're hearing the same answers all at once. And it's much easier to get them calibrated on which candidate's the right one for us than happening 3 separate times. And by the time we get to the final interview, it's been 2 weeks since I saw, which one was that again? What? Tracy. Was she
Absolutely.
the blonde? No way. She was the other. She was the tall one. No. Like, you just start to forget that, because especially if you're interviewing a lot of people. So there's a whole range of benefits in there that, again, I get a little bit worked up, excited about it, just because we have the opportunity to do some of these things. And again, that's an example that actually was going to cost us less, because we're not dragging this whole thing out. We're getting the person in the role faster. So if there's benefits to this, every solution we have to optimize hiring doesn't necessarily require us to spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time to redo that. That's my encouragement to anyone listening here.
Interesting. And then I guess to round this idea out, or like this data point, is there information on the average time to hire, or what a recommended time to hire looks like? Because I know there are companies out there that are like killing it and they're under 30 days. And then there are companies that are like sitting at
30
more
days,
than
I
30.
wish.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's rough
So
for everybody.
So that's a great question. We actually get that question almost every year from someone on our research advisory boards. We have leaders from Southwest Airlines, Lineage Logistics, all these incredible companies on our advisory board giving us ideas for things they want to see in the research. Like, they get the benefit of, I want an answer to a question that may be unanswerable to me in this position. And I get the fun of, ooh, this is like a playground. I'm so excited to figure out which one they want to ask. And one of the questions that they've asked us a couple of times is, what is a good number for that? And the problem is, we're being asked that by someone from Southwest who may be hiring software engineers to run their app, and they're hiring gate agents to, wave the little shiny things that the planes can park. Like, they have all these different types of people on their thing. So even they know within their own workforce, time to fill for this job is radically different from that one. So saying there's a good number or a target for that is really tough. It's like saying your retention rate for your company should be X.
Yeah.
Well, if you are running a call center, you would dream for the day when your turnover was 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're running some other types of organizations, you're running a nonprofit where people are mission driven and connected, you're like, hey, if we lose more than 5% this year, something's desperately wrong with us. And so it's like that. It's really hard to pin down an exact number. My encouragement would be, know your own numbers, number one. The number one metric employers are using is quality of hire. Number 2 is time to fill. So know your numbers, and then benchmark against those. Say, this year it's this, next year we want to be 10% better, or next year we want to be this much better. You may be able to find some industry specific numbers if you're looking around your space, but overall, that's my biggest encouragement, is compare against yourself. Like, when I'm going to run one of those races, I'm not saying I got to beat that guy over there. I just want to run my own race. You'll never reach the finish line if you're running someone else's race. So that's my encouragement.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it makes a ton of sense. And, for example, in retail, where I spent basically my entire career before tech, I mean, it was a great year if you were under 60%, turnover. It's just crazy.
Turnover. And then the time to fill was, hey, Tracy, looks like you're vertical, you're breathing, you're sober,
Right.
you smell good. Okay. We actually need someone folding shirts right here, like right now. Could you go over here and start? Like, we'll get your paperwork figured out later.
It's like a 5-day time to.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, can you start right now?
Right. Like,
so,
how
there's a whole
available
range.
are you? Right. Like, we can do your I-9 right now. We'll do a background check later. Don't worry. It's fine.
How immediate is immediately? That's what I really want to know.
Right. It's a great point. It's such a great point. Anything goes in retail sometimes. I want to pivot a little bit, because we talked about artificial intelligence at the beginning here, and I know that this is something that is near and dear to your heart. And one of the things that you said when we first met prior to this recording is that artificial intelligence in HR basically provides this opportunity to make people and businesses more people-centric. Mm-hmm. And I really like that. And I want to give everyone time to really understand what that means and what you mean when you basically put artificial intelligence and people together, rather than seeing it as a division and a way for people to be divided through technology.
So I'll tell you, every single person listening to my voice right now, if you close your eyes for a second, please don't do it if you're driving, but if you close your eyes for just a second, think about what your idea of great HR looks like, of a great talent function, like whatever role you're doing, think of what that great looks like. And often it's a little bit farther ahead than where we are. part of that is because the things we want to do, we know that will lead to that. Spending time on our values, communicating those, spending time on developing a set of leaders who are ready to take on new challenges in the business. And so we don't, run around with our hair on fire when someone leaves. Like those kinds of things you want to do, you would love to do, but you can't quite get around to because you've got to handle that investigation. You've got to look through the stack of resumes. You've got to reconcile the benefit statement. You've got all these other things that are demanding our time. If we can have AI handle some of those things that are important or urgent, but not important tasks, then we can focus on those things that do matter. And we can get closer to that vision of what great HR looks like, that people-centric, I care about, we're touching every person. No one here feels like they're in a vacuum or in a bubble because they know that we care. That's the vision most of us have for what great looks like. And we're always trying to get there. My hope, my perspective is that AI is one of the things that we can do to help enable that.
Interesting. I think that that's exactly how we can leverage AI. It's not about replacement theory. It's rather about how we leverage it and how we allow ourselves the time to do the other things that we so desperately want to do. I think it's a perfect way to explain it. And I know that there is also a story that you have. You wanted me to remind you of this. Hopefully you're like, wait, what's the story?
Yes.
Hopefully you remember it. But it's a story about bringing the human element to human resources.
Yeah. So, goodness, I love telling this story. I tell it on myself, as a penance for doing the wrong thing the first time. So, the important thing that we all know is HR is about people. It's about supporting, serving, caring about people. It's not just about processing papers and keeping us compliant, everything else. Those are parts of our job, but it's about the people over most of all. So I was reminded of that lesson a few years ago. I was driving to the hospital. My wife's about to have a baby and I am freaked out. So I'm very calmly driving 500 miles an hour to get us there. They would get inside, they get her all set up and everything. And they got this thing strapped to her stomach called a tachometer that's measuring the strength of her contractions. And I am just fascinated by this. I'm the data guy in the room. If you can't tell already, like that's my love language. Right. So I'm standing over here looking at the little screen readout, just fascinated by this. And behind me, I hear my wife say, "Whew, that was a rough one." I was like, well, on the screen, it wasn't that bad, actually. When you compare it to this one over here and look at the peak and the valley and I'm like over here just talking away. I'm like, wait a minute, what did I just say? Like, this is, like, shut up. Don't say anything else. Like she couldn't get up or I might not be here today to talk about this.
I was going to say, I would freak out on you.
I tell that story though, because it's easy for me as the data guy and I love talking about technology and all these things. Sometimes I forget that, hey, I'm looking at this set of information. That's an employee number. Behind that, it's a person, their family, their dreams, their vision for their career, all of those things, the health of their kids, all that's wrapped up in that employee number that we are tasked with serving. So that's my encouragement again to everybody out there. Like if you're like me and you get excited about the data and the big things and reporting out all that stuff, don't ever get so far removed you forget that behind every one of those employees that you're serving is a family and their dreams and all the other stuff, because that's the joy of this. Honestly, I have great friends. I have a family that are in accounting and marketing and finance and IT, all these other fields. Like they can't have that same touch and connection and support for people that we get to in HR. It's a very big responsibility, but it's also a privilege and it's such a joy.
Oh, what a wonderful story. And I agree. We have a really amazing opportunity to transform not only businesses, but people's lives. Mm-hmm. And if we see that opportunity in front of us and we appreciate that opportunity, we're probably part of the set of HR professionals that are really transforming just the landscape and those who have an impact on the landscape of work today. And I'm sure that there are people listening who are like, oh, I wish I had an HR person who guided me or that I worked with who felt the privilege that they have or felt this way. Because of course there are HR people that are not so connected to what we do. But imagine if every single person was. And I'm really inspired by your story. And I also think, it sounds like this was your first child, maybe, where you realized that so, maybe not the thing to say.
It was the first time I was in that specific room in that situation. So right. It was a surprise for us.
But you know what? It's a wonderful story that also sheds light on how it's okay to make, some maybe not make mistakes is not the phrase necessarily, but learn from things that you've done, learn from your actions,
Mhm.
learn from your words, because although it's, it's a story that is lighthearted, it definitely sends the message, and gets the message across that you're, equating the two between what your wife experienced and what you shared, and how interested you were in the data combined with what is behind that data. I love that message. It also shares that, at the end of the day, like, we all are going to be confronted with new experiences, and we learn from those experiences, whether we do the right thing or the wrong thing, or it's just a neutral thing that we've done. And learning from our life experience is just as important as acting on those learnings and maybe allowing those things to change or affect the way that we proceed. So I think it's a fabulous story. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me, because I would have forgotten in the excitement of the research. But that's one of those that, again, I think everyone gets a good lesson from that. And any of the ladies in the audience who have been through that experience are going to be like, yeah, you're lucky to be alive. So
Yeah,
it all works out.
definitely. I'm actually thinking about my own experience with labor and delivery. And I
Hmm.
remember both my husband and I were fascinated by that. And given that I had twins, I know that you have your own experience with this.
Hmm.
We were like, oh, this is like, what's the difference between if someone is having contractions with twins versus a singleton, as they're called. And I learned that that's a term, by the way, while being
Hmm.
pregnant with twins. I had no idea that single babies were called singletons in the twin world or the
Yep.
multiples world. And the nurses were like, just focus. Like, let's not talk about the data behind the, let's just focus. I'm like, okay, fine.
This is not the time for abstract thought. There is a very specific action I need you to take right now. Yes.
Right, exactly. But thank you so much again for really bringing the human element. It's a fabulous reminder given the name of my podcast. It's very important to me. And I appreciate having, someone like-minded on the podcast, though not a requirement, but it is
Mhm.
always nice to really kind of send that message home and allow the listeners to really reflect on what that means. Like, what does it mean to bring the human back to human resources? What does it mean to really think beyond the number and remember that every single person is effectively a number in a business, and every number in a business is effectively a person or a human that is impacted by decisions. So thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, for sure. I love breaking that stereotype what a data loving person's going to be, and I think did a good job of that one. So
Yeah.
thank you again for joining me, for encouraging and enlightening the community out there with the work you're doing as well. It's truly impactful, and I know everyone out there listening agrees with me when I say thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And maybe this is the perfect segue then for allowing the listeners to maybe connect with you. Where can they learn more about you, your podcast, the data that you are so actively researching and providing to people?
Yeah, so a couple different ways. You can find me on LinkedIn easily, Ben Eubanks. I'm there. You search, you'll find me pretty quick. If you'd like to see like the report, the data, some of those things we talked about today, the research, if you want to see more about that and learn more about some of the other findings, we make our research completely available for free. We don't charge any practitioners that want to see the reports and all that stuff, because when I was a leader, I had zero budget for that kind of thing. And so I want to make that easy for everyone. So if you want to see the reports and the other data we talked about today, you can find that at lhra.io/access. You can get access to the research library, learning, core HR, payroll, talent acquisition, a little bit of everything there to help you be smarter tomorrow than you were yesterday.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well, so all the listeners can easily click and access all of that amazing data. Thank you so much, Ben, again, for being on my podcast, and I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.